Firstly, I would like to pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land that we meet on here today. We meet on the Wurundjeri and Burrarung people's land, and I'd like to pay respect to their elders past and present. Little tip, don't move away from the mic. So I suppose a lot of you have probably come across Arup or know Arup, but I think it's always interesting. People come and sit in this building and they think, oh God, what does Arup stand for? But actually it was a person. Ove Arup was our founder of the company, and we famously came to Australia originally to do the building engineering for the Sydney Opera House back in the 60s. Ever since then we've continued to grow. We've got about just around 2,750 people across Australasia. And we are I suppose, a total design firm right from planning through to engineering. And we also like to think that we're the creative force behind a lot of the world's icons, and of course the one here closer at home. One of the things I suppose is a little bit unique about Arup, and we like to kind of share with people when they come to our home, is the difference our organisation set up. So one thing that our organisation actually sits all in a trust. Every Arupian, as we call them, actually has shares in that organisation. So we are part of the decision making, but we also share, I suppose, the remuneration. And a big value of our organisation is research. So last year we did $30 million worth of research globally, and it's really important in what we do. The other thing that I think is really important that we're pushing at the moment, or I should say pushing, but is really important for the work that we're doing, is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly around homelessness, and again the topic of today are really about livability and how do we get people to interact in society. One thing I'll just say here in Melbourne, if you weren't aware, we're involved in a lot of city shaping projects from Melbourne Metro through to Western Program Alliance. We're also technical advisor on the rolling stock for the DOT, including MRPV. So welcome to Arup. I look forward to, if I didn't catch up with you over there, I look forward to catching up with you of the evening, but today is formally about Arup now handing it over to the ITE ANZ, and they will now run the evening for tonight. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Mark. So firstly, I'd like to give a big thank you to Mark, Andrew and the rest of the Arup team for hosting us in this beautiful venue tonight and for sponsoring the event. So on behalf of the ITE ANZ, I'd like to welcome you all to the fourth of 6 seminars for 2019, this one focusing on rail transport infrastructure, the value to the community. So my name's Danielle Rebecki, and I am a young IT committee member, and I'm also joined by my fellow committee members Tabitha and Felicia, who will be helping me run the session today. So we're pleased to have 4 subject matter experts from industry offer their perspectives on new rail infrastructure, a topic which significantly impacts how Melbourne will grow to meet its growing population. So before we start the presentations, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping items. So for those of you that don't know much about the ITE is an international educational and scientific association. It's based in the US, but we have over 15,000 members in 90 countries. And our main aim is to bring together people to exchange information and to develop the transport profession. So Australia and New Zealand operates as a joint section, and it's based in Melbourne. And we always welcome new members, so if anyone is interested in becoming a member, feel free to reach out to me or one of the other committee members at the end of the session. I'd also like to thank all of our Australia and New Zealand sponsors, without whom we wouldn't be able to put on free events like this one. So, as part of the AusTraffic Worldwide Learning Opportunities, AusTraffic have extended a generous sponsorship to enable the ITE ANZ to offer financial assistance for young members and students to attend international meetings and conferences to contribute to their personal and professional development. So as part of this, I had the opportunity to go to Austin, Texas a few weeks ago to attend the IT International meeting and conference, and this was a fantastic opportunity for me to gain some professional development skills. I got to attend lots of technical sessions and networking, and really got to capitalise on the ITE's global network. So this is a really good opportunity offered by AusTraffic, and I strongly recommend for you to keep an eye out for opportunities that are coming up. I think they usually advertise them on the ITE website. So at the beginning of the year, the ITE formed a Young Members Committee, officially called Young ITE. And this group really aims to advocate for and engage students and young members, and we're hoping to put on a few events in the latter part of this year, so keep an eye on this space. So we're currently seeking nominations for our annual awards. So these awards will be presented at the President's Dinner in November. I think an exact date and venue for this night still to be confirmed, so an email should be coming your way soon regarding this. And if you'd like to stay connected to us, please follow us on LinkedIn. That would be really great. And I think we'll be setting up a Facebook account soon, and feel free to join our mailing list to hear about events that we've got coming up. So without further ado, I'd like to start the presentations. If you could all please put your phones on silent, turn them off, that would be great. And I'll introduce Felicia up here to introduce our first speaker.
Hello everyone. Our first speaker is Richard Vasta. Richard is a design director at CPB Contractors, where Richard manages major infrastructure projects including design and engineering solutions for private and government clients. Richard has worked in numerous operational roles in civil infrastructure industry for over 20 years in Australia and UK. Richard drives successful outcomes for his business and clients by challenging the norm, driving accountability, and working with honesty and integrity. You know what you get working with Richard, and he's a proven performer that delivers. In his spare, Richard enjoys playing golf and tennis. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Richard Vasta.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Great to be here. Much appreciated the opportunity. So thanks, Michael, for having me here. And it's good to come back and talk about a project which I spent 3 years working on, which is the Caulfield to Dandenong project, which is affectionately known as SkyRail. So I'll be talking about the complexities involved in delivering this project and some of the challenges that we face, and also the benefits to the community. So without further ado, there's a video to start, and I'll kick this off. There we go.
Authorised by...
It's crammed 3 years of work into a minute and a half. It makes it look pretty simple, but it was a little bit more complex than that. But over the scope of works, which you can see here, the 9 level crossings that were engaged to be removed was the biggest project undertaken for the State Government of Victoria. So you can see on the diagram here, there's 3 distinct zones. We've got the A, B, C, D, which is Zone 1, so that's through Carnegie, E and F, which is through Clayton, and Noble Park has G, H and I. So they're the 9 level crossings which we removed over the period of our project. We built 5 new stations, and we upgraded the rail systems network from the city all the way out to Cranbourne and Pakenham. So huge job, a couple of $1 billion in 2 years. But the key there is the benefit to the community in terms of the removal of the dangerous level crossings and creation of parks underneath. So we saw 22.5 hectares, so 11 MCGs as we coined the phrase on our project. And the upgrade in the signalling system work results in an increase in capacity on the network of 42%, which is huge. So this is a picture of the straddle carrier lifting in an entire span across the live rail network. So just a very quick snapshot of the complexity of the project that we had to navigate. Various challenges there, working the platforms that you can see down below, the blue parapets on the platforms delineate the project and show the proximity that we had to work within. So very tight corridor, lots of challenges, but some great things we worked through. So key things for us working through on the project, managing the spend was enormous. So have been on a project that turned over $160 million per month. So if you think about the scale of that, bring it back to per day spend of $5 million, and you have to drive that accountability and spend through the job to be able to hit the targets. So really important for us. Program up the top right-hand side there is a really, really crucial one for us. We're occupying the rail network, we're minimising disruption, we're looking at every avenue to shorten the critical path, including the straddle carrier, and look at the cycle times of that, which in the tender it was 2.5 days per span. That was reduced down to 1 day per span. So the benefit there is we're out there for less time in the community doing this work. So the narrow rail corridor, this is something like I've never seen before in my time in civil engineering, the challenge of building 2 elevated viaducts at the back of people's houses in between a rail corridor and their back fences. Our selection of the option to go with an elevated structure as opposed to the usual solution selected for the state government's trenches resulted in connection of the communities on either side of the train line, which were previously bisected. So previously people on either side of the train line that never interacted with one another, all of a sudden now they're left with a shared path underneath an elevated structure where they can walk from one side of the old rail line to the other. This is a picture of our straddle carrier in operation here and being set up. We had a single point of entry for the site. This is at Murrumbina, where all of the segments were delivered, assembled, and then erected from there. So the benefit there for the community is really about limiting the impact on transport and disruption through all of the areas. So the transport corridor is extremely tight. This allowed us to deliver the segments to one location and manage the traffic in the area so that we could, again, minimise the impact to the community. Stating the obvious on a big project like this, managing the dollars is paramount so that we can all make a profit and keep our businesses sustainable. Forecasting on a big job like this it's an enormous challenge. So getting the skills into the people and training and for your people is really important here. And again, driving accountability through the teams. This picture here is of the station canopy during construction under a rail occupation. So very complex design work, terrific work done by the consultants and construction team to deliver this. As I touched on, driving accountability through the job was enormous, and making sure that dealing with the scale of a job like this is something that people aren't always used to. So in Australia, these jobs only come around very infrequently. So dealing with, as I said, a $5 million spend per day takes some adjusting and getting your head around that. So some people who aren't used to that really need that support and guidance to be able to be comfortable with that spend. And it might seem counterintuitive to make sure that you do spend, but if you don't spend the money in time, you're not going to achieve program and get out of there and finish the job on time. The last point there, sticking to the plan and managing change control it's so important on a big job like this where decision making is spread across a very large team. in order to make sure we understand what the implication of that change is that people are thinking about, you need to fully understand what the unintended consequences are, so you don't make a change in one area of the job and then all of a sudden results in additional costs being incurred or delays being encountered elsewhere on the project. This is a picture of the elevated viaduct, partially constructed. You can see the straddle carrier on the right-hand side carrying a span. So essentially the construction phase here, you can see that we're lifting a span, driving along the top of the viaduct, and then places the span into position. The straddle carrier drives along the viaduct back to Murrumbina, picks up another span, drives along and places the next span along. So imagine 6 kilometres of a viaduct being constructed. Underneath this viaduct, you can't see a live train line. So all of the considerations and on the outside of this viaduct on the left-hand side here, and the right-hand side, you've got people's houses. So the clearance involved in elevating this structure and placing it into position and making sure that it actually did fit was a key consideration for us and the community that we were working within. So we're out there 24/7. We're out there for 2 years lifting viaducts into position and spans, working through the night. So the engagement with the community was a key factor for us that we really needed to take control of at the start of the job. You may have heard the group called the Anti-Skyrail group. They were quite prominent in the area, and they required a lot of management, and I suppose, and so did all of the rest of the community that weren't necessarily affiliated with that group. But I'm pleased to say that we're actually getting a lot of positivity from the community about our project, and people have realised that whilst the disruption at the time was there, and it was probably painful for some of them, the benefit is now that they've got a viaduct which carries them into the city more efficiently and a parkland underneath at the back of their houses. The other key things to note here is the selection of the viaduct option here was the only real one that we actually were able to do, and that we arrived at after a number of iterations to get to this solution, to be able to physically fit a viaduct which could carry a fully loaded train on these lines. So each one of these viaducts carries a single line in each direction. So we had to carry the freight train or cater for the loads on the freight train here. So pretty complex stuff, but a great solution which the team delivered. So the other key point here was the engagement with the rail operators and the regulators. To work over an operating rail line is very sensitive for people that aren't used to construction activities happening adjacent to their assets. So engaging with them and working with them really closely to demonstrate that we will actually deliver this without impacting their asset was really important, particularly for MTM, whose operations obviously have financial implications if they don't meet those targets. So disruption. So coming in and building these viaducts whilst minimising the disruption, working directly adjacent to the transport corridor was crucial. However, the times when we connected the elevated structures back into the train lines at grade, we needed to take out rail occupation. So set periods of time where we had to bus the community members that were used to catching the train at all of the stations that we've talked about there. We had to have buses running through the community and picking people up and taking them to their destination whilst we were operating and connecting the train lines back at grade. So you can see 5.5 million busing passengers were transported around the site and during our construction phase. Again, the key driver here is making sure that we committed to the timeframes that we did at the start of the occupations and making sure that they were planned effectively so that we could hand back the rail line critically on Monday morning before that first service. The last thing we would want to do, or wanted to do at all, was delay passengers because, one, there were penalties, but also that the feedback and the negative publicity to LXRA and the project was significant if we did that. So one of the other key things working in an area where you're building elevated viaducts in a community is media presence. And in the age of social media, now Twitter, YouTube, Facebook groups were set up. We had to be pretty resilient in terms of managing the negative press that did come, and also conscious that our team members understood the importance of behaving properly in a community. So really important messages to relay to our team that you're always under the watch of the community. So, correct behaviour, making sure that we are respectful of people, not parking across their driveways in a highly sensitive area, so particularly the Carnegie area. So good lessons for people to actually take on board in building infrastructure within a very tightly contained urban environment. So the managing the community point, it was paramount at the start where there was negative publicity about the project, and the engagement throughout the duration of the job and making sure people were aware of what was going on was crucial. And I was part of committees where we would engage Monash University, the local councils, and just keep them up to speed with what was happening on the project so that there were no surprises for them. If we had night works, so that we would occasionally move people out of their houses if they were upset or unhappy about that. So these are all the things that help turn the tide of negative publicity within the community to becoming a really positive outcome in the project. So this is a finished product here. I can touch on the insights, but it's probably more important to look at the pictures and see what the legacy that we've left behind is here. So connected communities on either side, we've got shared paths running through, activity nodes where the community can gather and play basketball, table tennis, and there's gym equipment dotted all throughout the alignment, the 12 kilometres of shared path that we constructed. So really great legacy to leave behind. I live about 1 kilometre away from Carnegie here, and happy to say that I use the bike path with my 2 boys and my wife riding along, and it's great. It's really rewarding as an engineer. This is what we do. It's we make a difference to the community and we actually add value. So it's something we can all be proud of when we have our little part to play in these infrastructure projects. So, and again, so we've removed 9 dangerous level crossings. That's our premier, obviously being part of the removal ceremony there. 9 level crossings gone, so we're saving lives there, which is the most important thing. Getting people to and from the city more efficiently on more trains. 11 MCGs of open space created and bringing communities together. So really proud to be part of the project and thankful to be able to share with you for tonight's presentation. So that's a finished product of one of the station canopies in Murrumbeena. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Richard, for your presentation. Now, our second speaker is Amy Chow. Amy is the Associate Director at AECOM, a global infrastructure firm. In her role of practice leader, design and planning, Amy is responsible for a team of 30 urban planners, urban designers, and landscape architects. With the qualification in civil engineering, urban planning, and traffic management, Amy has over 18 years' experience in providing transport planning advice for major transport projects within the city's context. Her career highlights to date include leading the delivery of transport strategy for the new Optus Stadium in Perth and providing travel planning advice to businesses impacted by the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Ladies and gentlemen, please extend a warm welcome to Amy Chow.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone. Wrong way. Okay, so before I start, I've got something to admit. I find public speaking terrifying, and I also find public speaking terrifying when I'm standing in a room with people I know. So there's a lot of people in this room I know, so I apologise. But I was given some great advice once, and they said to have a bit of an icebreaker at the start of your presentation. Now, I've got 2 icebreakers, but I thought they really started to resonate with this idea of rail infrastructure in place. So my first one is this picture here. Now, this is a rural train station in the south of England, Waterbury Station. This is a picture, Victoriana building. Now, about 40, 50 years ago, British Rail, the operators at the time, decided that not all rail infrastructure was required. They decided that they could get rid of ticket masters and put that onto the trains through conductors. Now, to my benefit, that meant that this station came up for sale, and my parents bought it and renovated it. So this is where I grew up. For 16 years of my life, I lived in one of the rooms overlooking the station, and it's still operational today. So there's trains going past all the time. So for me, that really started to spark a love for transport, and I guess that's why I'm in transport today. But that's a bit of a personal journey there. But then I started to think about transport and stations and place, and what do we love about some of the best places we go to? So I did a quick Google, and according to Luxury Travel Expert, what are the 10 best stations in the world? Now, this was my other icebreaker, because you think this is not relevant at all, but I thought we could have a bit of, we could look at some nice pictures, because we've got a lot of engineers in the room. I'd like to think I'm a bit more on the design side. So this was number 10. Now, don't ask me to pronounce any of these, but this is Belgium. I thought it was a lovely picture. Portugal, really nice, hey? You know, you can imagine people taking pictures of these things and really loving them. Japan, that's excellent. Melbourne even gets in there. And I actually had a text, yeah, it's in there. And I actually had a text from a colleague today saying, what's Melbourne doing in your top 10? And this isn't me, this is Luxury Travel Expert. And to be honest, I hate Southern Cross because it stinks of diesel. But there we go, it looks beautiful. Obviously France gets in. This is in Mumbai, beautiful station, absolutely amazing. It's a beautiful place. Germany, they love a good Bahnhof, I can pronounce that. New York, of course, has got to be in there. But number one was, St Pancras in London. No, not number one. Antwerp? We're there, sorry. So there we go, just indulge me on my top 10. But it's great, Google top 10 stations, and you come up with some really interesting things. So I'm here to talk about, not so much about the rail infrastructure in terms of the stuff that we know how to build and the boxes, it's more about the place. Think of some of the greatest places you've been to, and think about how rail infrastructure fits into that. They're at the heart of our most successful communities. And within Melbourne, you can start to think about maybe where you live if you've got a railway station. They're destinations in their own right. Yes, they get people to go from A to B, but they can be a place where people congregate and provide that level of activation. And obviously they play a really important role in helping us get to work and to play. So they really form a great part of people's lives. Now, this is where I live, this is Hampton. I love living in Hampton, and one of the main reasons is the railway station. There's a great atmosphere about it. When the level crossing comes down, I hope they don't ever remove it. It just provides a level of activation in the space, and it provides some noise, and it provides a bit of life into the space. And there's a lot of local cafes that have formed around it. There's people there going to and from work. So for me, that's one of my favourite places, is just my local street where the train station sits. But not all rail infrastructure is created equal. I don't know, does anybody know where this is? Yeah, Williams Landing. This is some of the new rail infrastructure that we like to provide. And it's really interesting looking at some of the pictures I showed you earlier, which have more of a historic content. Now, yes, I recognise in this photo that the area isn't developed, but you start to see, does that really have a heart and soul to it? I don't know if I've got a pointer on here. But if you have a look at sorry, I can't move from this damn thing, and I don't think that's working. If you look at the structure plan for this area, this here is going to be the high street. So that's where you're going to start to see activation. But that's a 400-metre walk to the station through a really big intersection. Now, my traffic engineering friends in the room will probably love that intersection. But what does that mean for place? Does it really have an ability to create a great place? Thinking back to those photos that I showed you, is this somewhere that's really going to resonate with people and form part of their lives? So this is where the importance of urban design comes in. And I've got another thing to admit. I'm talking a little bit about LXRP today, which Richard probably knows a lot more than I do, because my team are the technical advisors on the urban design and landscape architecture side of things. So I've only been working in the project for about 6 months. But you start to understand why design is so important. We know engineering standards, we know how to build railway lines. Yes, sometimes they're complex, but they're pretty much, there's a standard set. But urban design is the human layer that we can provide to transport infrastructure to actually take this from a great engineering project to a great place. So the level crossing removal program, I'm sure a lot of you in the room know a lot about this, with the level crossing removals across the whole of Melbourne and the opportunities that actually these projects give to Melbourne to create better places. So LXRP, there's a common vision, and I love this vision because it talks about the lasting legacy of great urban design and placemaking. That comes before the transport infrastructure part of that sentence. You know, the transport infrastructure is really important, but it's actually the legacy. What do we want to create for our communities? And how do we leverage from this massive investment? And I was actually trying to find out how much money the government has spent on the level crossing removal program, and I couldn't find a solid number. But it's, you know, it's huge. So how do we make sure that we're actually getting the best bang for our buck in that? So urban design, the points of influence, what can great urban design lead to? This is taken out of the urban design framework for LX, which I'll come on to. But I've highlighted some of the words because I recognise there's a lot of text there. But some of those words in terms of resilience, health and well-being, cultural values, accessibility, character, inclusiveness. These are some of the things that a lot of infrastructure we provide doesn't actually have. So this is why urban design is so important, because again, it provides that human layer. It provides the layer that takes a great project into a great place. So within LXRP, there's a range of urban design documents. So there's the urban design framework, which you can look at online. So this is the overarching document that contains the principles and objectives of what we're trying to create in relation to place when it talks about the LXRP project. Urban design guidelines, that's something my team work on. That starts to really look at the specific context of where the level crossing removal or the station or the project sits. So what is that local content? The thing with urban design is it's not one solution fits all in terms of, which might be the case for some engineering standards. It's a case of how does this project sit within the local community. So these are the urban design principles and objectives that LXRP is working towards. There's a real range there, as you can see, everything from connectivity to wayfinding through to accessibility. Again, resilience comes up and the environmental sustainability of projects. We don't, you know, sometimes when we talk about urban design, we talk about places looking great or the streetscape or the furniture that you might sit on. But actually, how does urban design make a place that's resilient to change in terms of climate change, etc.? The key thing with the urban design framework is it relies on qualitative benchmarking. So this is how we start to analyse the projects that we work on in terms of the urban design guidelines. What are we trying to create? I've just taken a snippet here out of the document. But you can start to see that it uses there's a lot of words. But the issue with these, I guess, is the degree, and this is what I wanted to talk about, is the level of subjectivity to these things. They're very much qualitative. So I recognise I've probably absolutely whizzed through my presentation, leaving more room for Tex and Co. And there's a terrible typo on this next page because I put qualitative benchmarking, which I meant to say quantitative benchmarking. So where is the quantitative benchmarking? How do we start to go from something that's quite subjective and can mean lots of different things for different people to actually providing some KPIs? And my view, and this is a view of me, maybe not ACOM or LXRP, is that we sort of lack at the moment within the projects that we're working on some more tangible KPIs. And going forward, that's something we would like to look at more. But I'd like to discuss that with you this evening as part of the conversation, is how do we start to actually measure the transport infrastructure projects? How do we start to measure the relative success from them from an urban design and placemaking perspective? So, thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for your presentation. Our third speaker is Tara Lee Williams. Tara Lee is currently Arup's transport strategist for Australasia, but is leaving in a month to take up the role of transport advisory leader for Europe. Prior to joining Arup, Tara had a wide variety of executive transport roles across government, including building bus, rapid transport infrastructure in Western Sydney, leading the development of large ITS projects including Alpo, SCATs and PTIPs, procuring billions of dollars of transport services across New South Wales. And during a slight diversion he set up the city transformation team at the City of Sydney and managed the joint funding deal with the state to build the Central Sydney and Eastern Suburbs Light Rail. Tara will talk through some of the decisions on the infrastructure and the influencing required to finally get this project to delivery after 26 previous attempts. Ladies and gentlemen, please extend another welcome to Tara Lee Williams.
So first I have to apologise, I'm not an engineer. I know that offends most of you. So to appease that, I tried to write a formula. Now, if any of you can work that out, A, I'll give you 10 grand, because B, you really should be in rehab, you're on drugs. It's totally made up. 26 plus 1. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. There were 26 studies to try and get light rail through the centre of Sydney, done prior to my arriving at the City of Sydney. There were some $12 million spent on those 26 reports, all of which filled this very beautiful shelf in the City Library. And my job was, on contract, to get light rail up. I was rather deflated when I walked into the library and looked at the shelf, and then something twigged. Every single one of those reports said exactly how you could deliver light rail in central Sydney. Grade, camber, drainage, alignment, traction. There wasn't a single word on why you would bother. Why would you actually put light rail through the centre of Sydney? Why would you pull a city apart? Why would you take the main road of Sydney out and change its function? And that's all I did. I just wrote a report that said why. Why? Because we want a better place. Why? Because we've actually destroyed the place with buses. We had businesses closing down because they could not get business. The main street of Sydney, it had the lowest rent value of a main street in Australia, in the biggest city. The streets adjacent had rents twice per square metre because the noise from the buses, the fumes from the buses, the visual impact of the buses, you couldn't even see across the street. You did not know where the street began and where the street ended because you saw this line of buses. And I came up with this lovely phrase, the conga line of buses, and I put that into the Lord Mayor's head, and that hit the media, and a year later we started to get approvals. A lot of fun for a non-engineer. I love these fake equations. 3 rails. Why 3 rails? We had a problem in the centre of Sydney. We had a lot of historic buildings, very low-rise buildings, very degraded buildings, literally falling apart. Previously, there had been light rail up George Street. And the points of attachment for the catenary were on those buildings. But the very reason that we could get this thing up was it was going to revitalise the entire main street of Sydney. So they were going to pull all those buildings down. We did not want to actually attach any catenary, any critical infrastructure to buildings that were already expired. So we, had a quick whip round the world and we tried to find the way of having wireless light rail over a 3-kilometre span, which is not out of question, but unfortunately most of it is uphill. And it got to be quite difficult. We initially settled on battery pack on the tram with flash charging at the stations. And then when somebody could actually add up, not me, did the calcs, we worked out that we would run out of power if it was a hot day. If you had the air conditioner on full belt and you had a full load, you just wouldn't get there. So we went with the very expensive third rail system instead. And it's only live when the tram is over it, so we don't electrocute people like we used to. Good engineering stuff. But it did add a significant a significant amount to the cost. 45-metre sets. The whole system was designed around 45-metre sets because they're like standard things that you buy off the shelf from those people with shops online. I want to buy a light rail set, 45 metres, yeah, I'll have 6 of those. Problem was, don't carry enough people. We couldn't work out how to get traffic across a corridor and run light rail along a corridor with 45-metre sets. So we thought, we're bold. We're the City of Sydney, we can do anything we want. We'll have 90-metre sets. We'll take 2 45-metre sets and we'll put them together. And this seemed like a wild idea, like all the numbers looked fantastic, you could carry everybody. Then we realised some blocks in Sydney are only 78 metres long. Bloody engineers, every time they find a reason not to do the simple thing. So we solved that later with 67-metre sets, and I'll talk about those in a minute, because there's a little bit of a problem there. And then we had the 2 squared problem. 2 standards, 2 contracts. The 2 standards are very interesting. Now, there's this city down here, Melbourne, we refer to it as Mexico when we're in Sydney, but down here we say it's a wonderful European, Parisian type city with lots of light rail. And you know what you're doing, and you have a standard, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's one of the few standard sets that I've read that go, well, that makes sense, that's what you would do. So, of course, New South Wales decided not to adopt it. In not adopting that standard, even though it was what was recommended, we spent $1 billion. Think about standards. As young engineers, I encourage you to actually think about the application of standards and why they exist. They don't just pop up. These are things that take years to evolve. Many very smart people spend a lot of time refining those standards. Over decades, they become brilliant things. They can be annoying because they stop you doing things like 90-metre sets. But they're there for a reason. They give you certainty. You can make decisions knowing what is going to happen. No, New South Wales decided to use the heavy rail standard for light rail on the street. Which means the slab has to be much, much thicker. And when you have a heavy rail train station only 400 millimetres below the surface of the street, this gets to be a little bit tricky. When you need to put the traction in, you have to be able to push a full tram with another full tram up the steepest part of the slope, because that's the heavy rail standard. You suddenly have so much redundancy built into your system. You have so much more traction, so much bigger motors that you need in your carriage. Just ridiculous. So that was a bit of blind idiocy. But that wasn't the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake was the squared. So we said we would have 2 contracts. This is George Street. This is 150 or almost 200-year-old street. Every service that has ever been delivered in Sydney has been run down George Street and then speared off. Sydney is 3 kilometres long and only 800 metres wide. George Street's in the middle. You put all the crap down the middle, you spear it off to the edges. Makes sense. Unfortunately, that means every single service in a heavy rail standard has to be moved from underneath the track. You can't have a single service under the track. And we said, well, if you're going to do that, sure, but we would highly recommend that you have 2 contracts. One to shift the services, and when you know you've done it, get somebody just to throw the stuff on the surface and put the little train set on it, make it run up and down, and hey, it'll be easy. And you'll get it for a lot less. And when we did the great project management thing and the time frame, it turned out that if we did the 2 contracts, we would go past an election date by 3 months. So they put them together. And now they're 2 years past the election date and they're overdue, and it's cost them $1 billion additional to the original budget. We discovered services that were not on any plan. So we potholed every metre for 3 kilometres, and we still discovered services that we did not know about. And we discovered things that we weren't meant to know about. I don't know if you know that the what do we, I suppose we call them the domestic spying agencies, actually have communications systems in our cities and they don't tag them. How do you know they're there? Well, when you cut them to find out who owns them. I was the brave project manager who said do that. I was the one who wore the outcome. Men in suits. So it all adds up to yikes dollars, which is a very technical term for more than the budget can withstand. Now, that B is a good B. That's a 13 billion. That's a positive. It's got a big plus in front of it. That was wonderful. To get this thing over the line, we spoke to every business in Sydney, not every transport planner, but every business in Sydney, and said, why don't you want to be on George Street? And they said, well, it's a hole. Why don't you want to be in Pitt Street, which is the most expensive real estate in Australia? Well, because it's becoming a Westfield, and we want to be associated with something of a higher value, a different brand statement. And it's placemaking. We spoke to the people in Castlereagh Street, where we have the very shishy shops that sell things that I don't understand for money that I can't afford. And they said, well, we'd like to be on George Street, but at the moment we wouldn't go anywhere near George Street. So we said, well, our concept is we take the vehicles out, we put light rail in, it's people. And they said, we would invest there. Within 9 months of announcing this plan starting, we had $13 billion of pre-DAs lodged at the City of Sydney for that corridor. The property transactions went through the roof. Everybody was making hay. And with that, we convinced the state government that they should sign off on the delivery of this project, because business realised that it wasn't a fantasy, a soft placemaking thing. It was a real thing about being a real place that people would inhabit, and when people inhabit place, economically, they spend money. But they were $220 million short in the budget. $220 million. And I worked for a little local government, and I was like, that's a lot of money for our little local government, $220 million. But then I added up what the rates would be for the uplift that came from the $13 billion worth of investment, and went, hey, we're going to make a profit out of this. So we had a big public meeting. The council agreed to support it on very strict condition about the quality of the placemaking that went ahead. That topped up the budget. We were called idiots, dummies for being taken for a ride by the state government. But we limited our liability at $220 million, and they went from 1.2 billion to 2.7 billion, and the city still hasn't paid its 220 million, because I'll show you some pictures in a minute. But the result is this thing is being tested in operation now, end to end, despite all of the horror of the delivery mechanism and the ridicule that it has delivered upon the state government trying to deliver this as a key project. The reality is it will fundamentally change the nature of the centre of the biggest city in Australia. It will increase the space that people have to occupy in their city. Often we had footpaths of only 1.8 metres on the main street of Sydney, and now they're going to have 10 metres to roam. And in fact, while the light rail has not been operating, people have just been walking all over this thing, and it has been, remember those protests, Occupy? They've occupied George Street. It's been incredible. Businesses have already opened. They're making huge profits. Sure, there have been little gnarly bits that have been sort of pulling at the edges and annoying people. Ignore it. Because in any major project, disruption, disruption, disruption. I had a minister say to me the most brilliant thing ever. He was a really idiotic minister, but he said the most brilliant thing to me ever. He said, all change is fantastic so long as it doesn't happen to you. And that's the public attitude to development. 67 metre sets. They are freaking huge. They're 4 metres shorter than the jumbo jet. They're going to take a little while to get past you. And they are very, very quiet. So we've had a few people be knocked over by these things, even in testing mode already. And we're just playing with, different sounds and lights and things to warm, because we're just not used to having on-street vehicles in pedestrian areas. But the reason we need those 67 metre sets is we're taking 182 buses an hour out of the CBD and transferring all of those people onto light rail. Those 182 buses, are just causing hell in the city. Taking them out would be brilliant. But they were going to be 90, so I think it's a win. Here's just a couple of pics of what happens when you let, I'm going to swear now, engineers do urban design. This is why the city has not paid the money. People are falling over the thing all over the place because there's not enough contrast. The ground surface, tactile ground surface indicators, the lumpy bits, weren't put on the edges, so we've had visually impaired people falling over and breaking their ankles. But all of the actual stuff that makes the train runs beautiful. This is how narrow George Street is. Yeah, there's just not much room. That is Wynyard Station on the right. That is the second busiest station in Australia on your right. There's 1.5 metres between the light rail and the entrance to the station. It's a tight corridor. You talked about a tight corridor? We had a tight corridor as well. Well, this is just my nightmare. This is why, when I was the project manager for the city, I wouldn't sign off on the money. What the hell is that? Apparently that's urban design resolved. So, anybody who wants to go out there and show them what colour contrast looks like and that grey is not the only colour in the palette, feel free. That's me.
Thank you, Terry. Our final speaker is John Mick, a professional engineer, a fellow of the National Society of Professional Engineers, a fellow of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. In 1975, he graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the Indiana Institute of Technology. He led program management on regional infrastructure projects valued at over $1 billion US. He's been a municipal engineer focused on developing capital improvement programs with 25 funding sources. Since 2005, he's been region manager of civil engineering consultancy focused on public sector infrastructure and more recently, Illinois division manager for business development efforts for $40 million worth of firms, $50 million in annual sales, from 350 Illinois clients. John was president of Illinois Society of Professional Engineers, president of Institute of Transportation Engineers for both the Illinois section and Midwestern District. John currently chairs the American Public Works Association, City Branch of Chicago Chapter, Education Committee, and Chicago Chapter International Affairs Committee. His proudest achievements are his four children, their partners, and 2 grandchildren. Please welcome John.
Thank you. Where's Michael Plant? Michael, I need you for the clicker, please. We'll make this fast. Amy, if you think you're nervous, oh my God. Congratulations to the 2 programs that were accomplished. And I'm an engineer, but it is fun to work with engineers and occasionally get things done. But you've got some stuff that's kind of challenging there. You're going to get 5 presentations. So we'll go to the first slide on the endowment. But before that, I will tell you, I know who went to Austin, first name again? Danelle. On behalf of Randy McCourt, our current ITE president internationally, greetings. I'm very involved in IT, and that's why that's up there. 2, on behalf of my country, I want to thank my driver and host, Warren Roberts, of the Municipal Engineering Foundation of Victoria. He's been dragging me around all over the state of Victoria for the last several days. I'll be here for 3 weeks on a study tour. And Michael Plant, a dear friend, a mate, a colleague. Michael and I worked in the States for a number of years. Michael came back home here, and Michael hosted me the other week at his home for a couple of days, as is Warren at this time. So again, on behalf of my country, thank you to your nation for accommodating me for a few minutes. I'll go really fast. So the first presentation is about the Midwestern District ITE endowment. Bottom line, we're planting apple trees for our children. When I was president of the Midwestern District of IT is 14 states in the middle of my country. We hadn't done enough about fundraising for our future. Yes, we gave scholarships. Yes, we did fundraisers. Yes, we gave a few dollars to a few people. But our Western District out in California and other Western states over 10 years had raised $500,000, and I was disappointed with that. So when I was president of this district, one of my goals as president was to start an endowment fund. So we did. We legalized it. The bad news for me, the year I ended my term, they said, well, if you want to run the endowment, the only way we're going to have the endowment is if you chair it. And I said, okay, fine. So now I'm the chair of that endowment. Over the last 2 years, we raised about $7,000. We're just starting. And if you wish to donate, you can go online tonight, look up Midwestern District IT, and send a donation via credit card. We take donations all the time. But that's enough on ITE. We'll go to my project, or our project, Michael. Thank you. So the CREATE program in the Chicagoland area is 25 grade separations, or as you call them, grade level removals. And I'm for grade level removals. But how many have been to the US? How many have been to the States? Okay, so in the States, to take a train from New York to Chicago takes 2 days. To take a train from Chicago to Los Angeles takes 2 days. To get a train through Chicago takes 2 days. So rail traffic across the U.S. needed Chicago to be unhinged. Michael, thank you. I'll just say Michael. So we had a project, not billions, but it was still important. I think the fundamentals are the same, and that's why Michael asked me to speak. We had 2 at-grade crossings of Grand Avenue in a village I lived in. And by the way, it was pleasant to hear that Amy lived in a train station. You probably lived in Sydney during the project. And this lad that was here, and I think he had to scoot, he lives a block from the project. I lived in Franklin Park. We had 2 at-grade crossings of Grand Avenue about 1 kilometer apart. And we also had 5 other grade crossings in the neighborhood, in a residential neighborhood. They were very challenged. Train traffic was moving at 5 to 10 miles per hour versus 30. On Grand Avenue, a 4-lane street in my community, traffic suffered over 230 hours of delay per day. Over 230 hours per day. So Dan Pritchett, the mayor of the village I lived in for a number of years, I was very fortunate to live in the same village with the project. Dan was our champion, and every project needs a champion, and Dan was our champion. Michael, the next slide, fine, I'll keep going. Our goals included eliminate the railroad and roadway vehicular conflicts and accidents, which cost over $300,000 per year. We had 30,000 vehicles in the roadway, and 45 trains on the 2 grade level crossings of the roadway, and those delays were costing over $600,000 per year. Michael, next slide. I'll go faster because I'm more nervous than Amy was. On a personal note, this is a plaque I have in my office, and by the way, those of you that are young at heart, take things away from your work and try to keep some of them. This is a piece of the rail that was removed for the project. That's the underpass. The mayor cut this in his garage. I don't know how the hell he did it, but he cut pieces and made plaques for each of us, and that's the rail that was removed. So, 2 big things here. We received the largest grant ever. The project cost about $50 million all in. We received about we received $14 million from the Illinois Commerce Commission, largest grant ever of that type, and then we received $11.5 million for another funding program. Going back a little bit, the Women's Club of Franklin Park in 1954, they hired a lawyer for $50 to start studying the problem. So you mentioned 26 studies. The Franklin Park community studied this for 50 years. Michael, next slide. My Mayor Pritchett, was so proud of our team, he memorialized this on a stone on the bridge. My mother and father are both deceased. My mom's crying, my dad's laughing up in heaven. But the mayor is in the middle. You can probably see it's been washed by rain over years. To the right of the mayor is me, the bald guy. To the right of the mayor is Senator Dick Durbin, right? We have a legislature with 100 senators and a bunch of House people. By the way, they don't know what the hell they're doing. They all argue every day. And Senator Durbin, as a matter of fact, goes to my church, and that's a coincidental fact for you to take home. But Dick, when he's at my church, he's Dick, but when he's in Washington, he's Senator Durbin. Who recognizes the gentleman next to Senator Durbin? when he was here, he came to the bridge a couple of times. He was a state senator, and he got us money. So that's why Barack is on the plaque. But so I once worked with Barack Obama and Dick Durbin. We had a lot of agencies. Michael, next slide, because I know I'm the only thing between them and a glass of wine. I was the program manager, and back to whether it's $2 billion or $13 billion with economic development, it's, as you know, scope, schedule, budget, communications. And actually it should be communications, scope, schedule, budget. Every day, every minute, all the time, no matter what size. Program management is rarely used in the States on infrastructure projects, and I was proud to be the program manager. Michael, next slide. We'll go faster. Leave time for the panel. We had a great construction team. The contractor built the project, but in the States, we had 4 operating railroads through the corridor. The Canadian Pacific, the Canadian National, the Indiana Harbor Belt, a local intermodal, interfreight line in the Chicago area. And we also had Metra, which is our commuter rail system in Chicago, Metra. We had a lot of characters involved in the project. Michael, next slide. Amy, it is nervous to be up here. Obstacles overcome, just a couple. I think the one thing, how many here work for public sector clients or work in the public sector? My company serves over 300 municipalities every day. We love it, even though it's kind of crazy. But they always say, well, we've always done it this way, and well, that's how we did it last week, and don't ask any questions. On this project, we used private sector mentality in a public sector setting. It was kind of fun. We got things done a lot faster. Michael, next slide. By the way, if somebody wants this, I can email it to you because I'm talking way too fast. We received money from Springfield and Washington. I was honored to go to both many times. It gets back to what you said, Amy, about place. And we're not engineers, we're communicators. So they would ask me to get on a plane or get in a car, and we'd go down to Springfield, Illinois, which is our capital. We'd go to Washington, D.C. and beg for more money, which is part of engineering, by the way. Engineers just don't do cross-sections or drainage design. We have to be good communicators. But we got a lot of money. We kept Grand Avenue open through the entire project, 30,000 vehicles a day, kept it open all the time. We also kept the rail traffic moving through the corridor just as they did. We didn't have to use the special mobile crane unit, which I was very intrigued by, but we did keep all traffic moving. We also acquired pieces of over 100 parcels of right-of-way, some partially and some in complete takes. Next slide, Michael. I can't remember which. That's the finished product. Program management was key. We'll go to the next slide. Let's see. Early demolition. Right. We bought the railroad track. We bought the railroad track in 660-foot strings and thousands of ties. And the contractor determined, due to tight size and due to logistics on the site, he decided to lay the realigned rail system by hand. Not him, his team. So they had a couple of hundred people working from Friday night, same thing, so the commuters didn't get bothered, from Friday night through Monday morning to swing a number of thousands of feet of rail into place, but did it by hand. 6,500 ties laid by hand, just like in the old days. And that's a celebration of the finished product. That's not a current train in the United States. We brought in a historic train for the ribbon. We brought a historic train in for the ribbon cutting because this is kind of a big deal. We were the first create grid separation built out of the 25. So let's move to the next one, Mike. Quick take, Michael. Quick take. So how many here know about compulsory acquisition, how you folks would acquire property? You would go out to Bob and say, Bob, we need your land or a piece of it, right? Shouldn't leave the mic. And you'd say, Bob, let's evaluate your property. It's worth $5,000. I made that up. And Bob, we're going to pay you. And then somebody argues, and you maybe pay him $7,000, but you pay him, and then you tell him to move, and he has like maybe 6 months to move and relocate, etc. We use what's called quick take. In Chicago, we say, we got a guy. We got a guy. So we had a state legislator that passed a special law, and it was only one sentence, and it said the Grand Avenue Railroad Relocation Authority will use quick take. So we were able to go out and talk to Bob and say, we want your property, and tell him what we're going to pay him. And then he said, well, I like more. We said, that's fine, take us to court. So while we were in court legally, we could acquire the property and move on to the property and start construction, while we were in court parallel giving him a better deal. So we still paid what was deserved. We didn't, this is French, I'm sort of bilingual. We didn't screw anybody, right? But we did pay him his due, but it saved us a year of construction time. And as you know, time is money, so we saved a lot of time by using quick take. cut and throw. I think, Michael, the next slide. I think I mentioned the cut and throw. This is the finished product, the rail lines. This is north of the structure in Franklin Park. On a weekend, they took, if you can imagine, I don't have enough video like the one gentleman, you've got 2 rail lines about a kilometer apart. The one rail line has to be moved and connected to the other for a 2-track structure, so that they had 150 people out there using bulldozers and small cranes. They lifted the track up, they throw it over, connect it, all by hand, and then laid 6,500 ties by hand to save money. Next slide. Cost management. Our Federal Highway Administration says that on a typical project of this size, $50 million, your change orders or your amendments during construction should be about, what did they say? I think 10 to 15%. They say 7.5%. We finished at less than 2% change orders. Change orders are amendments during construction, because you're right, you find stuff buried in the street. Who knows the best way to find a utility? Start a construction project. Because most of our clients say, don't spend money on looking for stuff now, let the contractor find it. That'll save us money. Not really. Next slide, please. I'm so proud of this. I should start crying again. I cried when this happened. I was in charge of the breaking of the ground. That was the first slide. This is the ribbon cutting. We opened the project. We had people from all over Illinois come and see it, because it was the first grade separation completed. It's one of the 25 of the CRATE program. This is my baby. My picture's over here next to Barack, as you saw. President Obama. And Dick, or Senator Durbin. Michael, thank you for having me. That's it.
Thank you, John. We'll now start the panel discussion. So can I invite Ms. Amy Child, Ms. Terry Lee Williams, and Mr. John Mick to the chairs over there, and anyone feel free to ask some questions. I don't know if there's a floating mic around.
I've been to 3 of the 10.
But yeah, if you have a question, just state your name and your organisation and then your question.
Jackie Fristacchi, City of Yarra, a municipal councillor, but I've been sitting in on the North East Link project hearings out at Bulleen, and one of my questions about urban design, and we had Craig Sharney from giving expert evidence on urban design, and was very critical of the urban design issues and all the interchanges, and said they're absolute nightmares. So, but my question is, the panel asked at what stage of the construction process would you refine the urban design? The evidence was it should be in the scoping project that is up for community critique as part of the public hearings, and the panel asked, or at least the argument was suggested in cross-examination that would be done later down the track. That it'll be ironed out later down the track. You don't have to worry much about the urban design. Could you comment on both those things, because it's very, very critical as to what stage of the process you get the urban design right. And maybe the level crossing, so both ACOM and Terry, would be great to get your contributions. And I might use this as evidence.
Oh, good.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so these views are definitely my own. Look, we need to be thinking about it at project creation, at the business case side of things, of the why are you doing a project. Yes, at North East Link at its heart is a roads project, but it's starting to look at the other benefits that it can start to bring, or the opportunities, obviously, any type of infrastructure project has impacts, so how do we start to mitigate them? But they also do have opportunities. I don't want to comment specifically on North East Link, but we really do need to start thinking about the urban design. You can't just throw it in at the end, because you're not going to get the best project outcomes. It's then more lip service. We don't want to just be doing a little bit of street upgrades with nice new pavers and say, well, there we go, we've done the urban design. So it needs to be brought in at the very beginning as part of the project concept and the reason why you're doing the project as well. one thing I didn't touch on so much in my presentation, but is looking at the economic benefits of including better urban design as part of infrastructure projects. Terry talked about the uplift in business rates and that people wanted to be in that area due to changes. So making those changes can start to have a broader impact. It's not just benefit on travel time saving, etc. There's a much broader value uplift to the community. So we need to be starting to think about that at the beginning as to the reason why you're doing a project, and when you're looking at the business case side of things, looking at the value that urban design can bring. So it should definitely not be a last-minute afterthought.
I think there's something even more brutally truthful that needs to be said about this, and that is that if you don't do the urban design before you start, you'll spend a lot of money doing variations after you've begun. And variations are the devil's work. 2%, 15%, 30%. There's a current project called A2MP in New South Wales, which is an urban corridor with a continuous flow intersection on one end of it. Arup's been involved in the design of it. I can't say too much, but let's just say that we didn't start with people. And if you don't start with people, you don't know who you're designing for, and you also don't know who's going to object. Because the great thing about thinking about people is you start to go, oh, they might not like that. And if they're not going to like it, don't design it in the first place, because pretty much inevitably the single best outcome for traffic, or the single best outcome for the movement of freight and goods, or the single best outcome for your rail corridor will not be the best outcome for people where they intersect. It requires compromise. And you have to really start with the people first, understand what the compromises are going to be. So a very simple example of that, our project started with a 5-stage pedestrian crossing in one of the most heavily tracked pedestrian sectors in the nation, because it leads to 2 football stadiums. And it ended up with a 2-stage pedestrian crossing that only took 40 seconds to cross rather than 3 minutes. But those variations, those design variations, are actually worth tens of millions of dollars. If we'd actually started building the thing and had to make those variations, they would have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So start with the people, design around people, think about the impact on people, then get into your detailed design when you know what it is you're designing, not the single best thing to solve the problem you started at, because your problem is not solved if people stop the project going ahead.
Councillor, quick one. This morning we were at, remind me, Warren, because I've been at too many councils. We were at Yarra Ranges. We were at Yarra Ranges Council studying public works. My answer is a story, because one of the people giving us information about the council used a story to tell what he was doing. My story is about 3 bricklayers. The answer to your question is the first day and throughout the project. But the story is there were 3 bricklayers. The guy walked by, sees the first bricklayer, says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm laying brick." He walked around the corner on the site and he saw the second bricklayer, and the guy says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a wall." He walked another half a block, he saw the third guy. He says, "Sir, what are you doing here?" He says, "I'm helping finish a cathedral." Finish a cathedral starting on day 1.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one more, and then I hope the panellists will join us for a quick drink before you go. So if you have any more individual questions, have we got one more at all? No, it looks like you want a drink. So that's fine. So if the panellists, if I could get a round of applause for the panellists, I think that was fantastic. And yes. Oh, sorry, Michael.
Thank you. Look, on behalf of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, I just want to extend a significant thank you to Mark Rowland and Andrew Griffiths, who have been instrumental in providing tonight's great venue and also providing some great speakers from industry. It's been a great time having John here. I had the chance to work with John for about 10 years at Baxter and Woodman. And for those who have worked in the US, you understand that most people work Monday to Friday, and then they also work on Saturday and Sunday. John's in the middle of a 20-day odyssey, which in Australian language is the equivalent of 3 months long service leave. John is packing in an enormous amount, and it really wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the great efforts of some senior leaders at Baxter and Woodman who are granting him permission. They've given him data so he can still email and, you know, just be able to do something, but more significantly, be able to take back knowledge and great knowledge from Australia back to the US. And, you know, a lot of times we talk about knowledge, we talk about talking, and I'm stealing a bit of your thunder, John, but talk about, you know, talk to the place next door, or talk to the place down the street, or maybe talk to the next town or the next state, but we really don't talk internationally. And that's one of the great things that the Institute of Transportation Engineers can do. Yes, it's a firm based in the US, but we're in 90 different countries, and this is what we can do. You can help bring people together. So I appreciate all of you as members and people within the ITE organisation coming along to these events. We love doing them. I particularly want to thank Danielle Rebecki and also Daniel Gashish, who have done an amazing job behind the scenes. Their tireless work, you know, I think Danielle's running on about an hour's sleep, and that is truthful, but always prepared just to put their hand up. We've got another couple of events coming up, one in October that, again, the committee is ready to help out with, and I believe we have our annual awards dinner on the 19th of November at the Kew Golf Club. We hope everyone can come if you're available, and looking forward to, you know, obviously the rest of the year, but 2020 when we'll have another great lot of events. And really to Arup, thank you, and please enjoy your evening.
Thank you.